Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you are all well and safe in this difficult period. I'm Julien Bonnaud from the Swiss Space Center in direct live from EPFL in Lausanne, and you are following the second session of our Be a Star in ESA's Universe 2020 about space law. Indeed, usually talking about space, it's talking about science, engineering, navigation, and so on. But without people from business, administration, and legal domains, space project and international collaboration wouldn't be possible. In today's agenda, we will have the chance to have two testimonies from professionals working in the legal aspects, one from ESA, Alexander Soucek, Head of Public International Law Division, and one in the Swiss industry, Florian Hess from RUAG Space in Zurich. Then we will have a talk from the Swiss Space Office, the Swiss delegation at ESA, represented by Madame Kamlesh Brocard. Our fourth speaker will be a human resource specialist from ESA, Florence Loustalot. She will present some programs at ESA for students and young professionals for ESA member states. Finally, before the conclusion, we will have a question and answer session in order to answer your questions from you, viewers of this show. Do not forget to indicate to whom is directed the question. I hope you will enjoy this session and do not hesitate to participate in the chat. Without further delay, I'm glad to let the floor to Mr. Alexander Soucek, Head of the Public International Law Division. Alexander, could you tell us about your career path and how you landed at the agency?
Thank you very much, Julien, for this very nice introduction. And indeed, it was a landing. So we are already in the space terminology. If it's okay, I would take a few minutes to tell you, the audience, about myself, because that's part of how I landed at ESA, and then indeed the career path, and then perhaps share with you a bit what it's actually like to do space law at ESA, which is quite an interesting daily job. I can promise to you, and I think you will understand what I mean. So let me say that space accompanied me since my early childhood, outer space. The fascination for astronomy. I know it's a kind of a thing all the space people always say, when I was a little child, I dreamt to be an astronaut. It's, you know, the usual thing. But for me, it was true, actually. And I had my first telescope at the age of 5, trying to find some stars up in the sky. And when I was a boy, I brought something here for you. I actually made even card games, you know, that astronomy card games that I forced my parents to play with me. You see here the telescope and the constellations and everything. Those are almost 35 years old, those cards with a golden background. So you see, that was really a fascination from the very early days. And when I grew up, I realized, however, at school, and that was a bit a tough awakening, that I was always better with words than with numbers. Although it was my dream to study astronomy, I realized at some point that actually means studying physics and mathematics, and that's certainly not my strength. So I had this thing with words, and history always interested me, and politics, and, you know, speaking to people and all that. And somehow naturally, because Dad was a lawyer, although not the typical lawyer, working in a different domain. Uncle was a lawyer, but not a typical lawyer, working as a journalist, you know. Also, I eventually studied law, but then also decided not to do the typical thing. And when I say typical for lawyers, I mean, you know, the classical careers, which are wonderful careers by all means, as a lawyer in a law firm, as a judge, as a notary, or in a classical company as a corporate lawyer. So I studied law, but my space passion always was still with me. And eventually, after having studied law, I continued with a postgraduate study at the International Space University, where I took a master in space studies in order to satisfy a bit the space part in me on top. So you see, that was an interdisciplinary choice that actually accompanied me all life long ever since. And it was not the worst of all choices, I have to say, because it helped me a lot to gain also an insight into the technical and scientific world of space beyond playing cards, I mean. So that is a bit just to tell you how this whole career path started in a way. Later on, I also had the privilege and the wonderful opportunity to get married to an ESA staff. So we are two ESA people here. And then our daughter is actually a space child, if you so wish, although I have not yet fully succeeded to ignite the passion for space. She's now 7 years old. And we met recently, about half a year ago, here in the Netherlands, a real Apollo astronaut, Rusty Schweikart, Apollo 9, and the commander of the International Space Station, European astronaut Alexander Gerst. And so I presented my daughter to them, and they asked her, "Do you want to be an astronaut?" And she looked at them with a slight desperation because she knows my passion for it. She said, "No." And then she looked at me, "If I don't have to." And so you see there, I have still to work a little bit on that. But nevertheless, everyone has its own passion, fascination, and that's how it should be. So how did I come into ESA? You know, I started as a YGT, as a young graduate trainee. And I see here in our meeting, Florence Loustalot, who will speak later on to you. And I must say, it was her signature in a way that opened the door to ESA, because she was in the committee hiring me at that time. So you see, it's also a small family in a way, and that's wonderful the way it is. And from there on, I had the privilege to meander through ESA for years. And with meandering, I mean, it was a long, winding road up to head of International Law Division, but that was precisely what helped me a lot and what was really perfect. So for the first years of my ESA career, I actually did not work in the legal department. I worked in what we call in ESA a program directorate. That means I worked with scientists and engineers in a specific domain of ESA. That specific domain was Earth observation. So something I didn't study in a way, but my duty as a young lawyer at that time was to work specifically on legal aspects within the Earth observation domain, data policies, for example, but also contacts with member state delegations, and I come to that in a moment. So that trained me from the early days of ESA to actually understand the mechanism of ESA in a very specific way, and that also to understand non-lawyers. And that's maybe the most important thing, because ESA is mostly made of non-lawyers, which is the way it should be, of engineers and scientists. And ultimately, you give a service not only to them, but to ESA as a whole. And so you better understand your clients and what their priorities are and their needs are. So those years in the Earth Observation Directorate helped me a lot understanding ESA as a mechanism, as a big international animal. I also had the privilege to see 3 different establishments over the years. When we say establishments, we mean different geographical locations where ESA is actually placed. The first 10 years of my professional life I spent in Rome, in Italy, next to Rome, in Frascati, not the worst of all places to be. So you combine Italianità, Italian lifestyle, with your passion for space. That's not a bad combination, I must say. From there on to Paris headquarters. That's where ESA has its headquarters, because it's an international organization, and as such, it must have a headquarters where, you know, the administration sit and where the political decisions are taken. And ultimately also ESTEC, the biggest and largest establishment of ESA in the Netherlands, where I'm sitting right now, though not in ESA, but at home due to circumstances. And so after 10 years in ESA, I finally then managed to end up in the legal department. It's wrong to say I managed, because the first years it was not even my choice. I was really happy where I was. But then after some years, you realize, well, I've done now as a lawyer a lot of interesting things among engineers and scientists, but how do I want to progress my career? Ultimately, I'm not an astronomer, I'm not an Earth observation engineer, even though this is my passion, even though I have made beautiful playing cards, but I'm not a scientist. I am a lawyer by study. And so it was time after about 10 years to then actually go in line and to actually start digging into what I really am as a professional person, a lawyer. And that's what I did. But in all those years, I never really abandoned my passion for space. I was for many years co-president and then president of the Austrian Space Forum. I was a flight director for Mars analog missions. I wrote books about space law, etc., etc. But this is all to illustrate just to you what it's like to take a path in ESA, and ESA allows that path, which is also not a given. You know, you have to be really grateful that this is possible. So in the remaining 5 minutes, let me maybe just tell you a little bit what daily life in the legal department of ESA looks like. And then give you in the very last 2-3 minutes some personal bits and pieces of advice. Not sure that they're useful, but perhaps they are. They were for me. So I guess you all know what ESA is, but in case you don't, let me just tell you it's an international intergovernmental organization. So it's a big international mechanism. And working as a lawyer for ESA doesn't mean necessarily doing space law all the time. So we're not sitting and having the Outer Space Treaty on our desk and studying and interpreting the Outer Space Treaty from morning till evening every day. That can happen. But most of all, we help as lawyers to make this mechanism called the European Space Agency run in a correct and in an efficient manner, organizing meetings, enabling legal decisions to be correctly taken, negotiating agreements. You might hear in the press that just 2 hours ago, ESA and NASA signed a memorandum of understanding for the Lunar Gateway space station around the moon. Super exciting. And I had the privilege, together with other people, of course, to participate the last 12 months in negotiating this memorandum of understanding with my fellow colleagues, lawyers at NASA. And these are priceless things, you know, because one day that thing will be up there on the moon. And so many people will have contributed to it, predominantly engineers and scientists, of course, but also lawyers, financial experts, administrators, but even down to the canteen personnel in ESA providing us with food. You know, it's all part of a family, and each person has a little bit in that thing. So when you see the space station up there, a little bit is yours, a tiny little mosaic piece. And we try to see law as an enabler also. That means it's not about law. It's not because we like law so much. Law is a tool. I guess my colleagues Florian later on also will confirm that, who is more into the contractual side. If we make wrong tools, then we don't achieve what we actually want to achieve later on. So it's really important to see yourself as being part of a service that you give. The questions you can get when you're at ESA, at the legal department, especially in international law, can be very, very dynamic, and you can get all kinds of questions. And it's also interesting that not for each and every question you have on your desk that lands on your desk, there is a textbook answer. So we don't always have a blueprint, say, okay, this is to be solved like this, written on page XYZ of a law book. Sometimes you really have to try to invent the right answer. You discuss and you think that's more or less where you should go. And this brings me to the end of my intervention, the last 2 minutes, if you allow. What are bits and pieces of advice?
Okay, I think we lost Alexander. So I'm sorry, Alexander. We will come back.
Sound back now?
Yeah, much better,
Yes.
much better.
Sound is back. So I don't hear you, but you hear me. That's excellent. And see, this is what I exactly said before. You always need to have some solution, even if there is no blueprint to it. But that's perfect. That was a wonderful illustration. So you see, what is an advice for your career in a way is that always have a backup. I meet often law students who say, really, I want to, true, it's actually written here on my little piece of note. I meet people who say, I want to become an astronaut, or I want to become the head of international law. I want to become the director general. Wonderful. And that's a goal you have to have in life, but you have to have a plan B if that goal doesn't work out. You have to realize that sometimes you can reach a goal through the back door. You know, my big goal was I want to be as close as possible to astronauts without being one. And in a way, I found a back door to that. Second thing is, in order to have a backup plan, you need to be flexible. So sometimes things don't turn out the way you think they would turn out. Sometimes you don't get a job, you apply 5 times and it doesn't work out, but something else turns out. And a few years later, you might again reach the place you wanted to reach. Finally, last but not least, especially in the world of space, it's really important to have an interdisciplinary mindset, to be open, to understand others. We at ESA work side by side, engineers, scientists, project managers, financial people, HR, history experts, you know, the whole range. And the better you have learned to understand each other, the better you can work. So that is really what, for me, is the essence of a career. Don't create a silo around you. Don't think you are in the center, but try to be a team player, and then you will have joy in what you're doing. So I think my 15 minutes are up, including 10 seconds interruption. Sorry for the sound problems. But with that, Julien, if it's okay, I hand back to you. And while the others are speaking, I'll sort out that I hear you again for the Q&A session afterwards.
Thank you very much, Alexander, for your great talk and this nice illustration. You are right. We always need a backup solution, maybe more especially into space. When we are sending things into space, there is always a spare, a backup solution, and you did really great. So once again, I can see that we have already questions from viewers. So don't worry, we will answer that later during the Q&A session. But from now, I'm going to let the floor to Florian Hess, contract officer at RUAG Space in Zurich. So Florian, same question. Could you tell us about your career path and how you landed in RUAG?
Perfect. Thank you very much, Julien. I hope you can see my presentation now. So welcome everyone also from my side. Firstly, of course, it's a big honor for me to speak to all of you on such a stage and on behalf of RUAG Space.
Sorry, Florian, we cannot see your presentation.
Can you not see it? I try it again.
Yeah.
So just give me a second. So can you see it now?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah, well, as I said, it's a big honor for me to talk to you all on such a stage, especially since this is a rather uncommon area for me, because I am, as most of you, also a student. I have a background in economics, so I did my bachelor in business. And I'm doing now my master's in management and law. Just in general about me, my name is, I'm 31 years old. I grew up here in the canton of Zurich, where I also studied and I went to school. And at the moment, as I said, I work 60% for RUAG Space as a contract manager, and the other 40% I'm doing my master's. I am part of the legal and contracts department in RUAG Space, and I'm actually responsible for about 20 space projects which are currently ongoing, and I'm responsible actually from the first step, from the contract negotiation up to the actually project execution, and then to the end of the project. And before starting for RUAG, I was able to travel around and did a world trip around the globe. So I love the international atmosphere. So then when I came back, I realized that I want to work for an international company in an international environment. So I started in 2016 as a junior contracts manager. And then after a year, I moved on and I had the chance to take over, as I said, my own project. So this was a great step for me that I got this opportunity. And yeah, I think one of my big advantages of my job is that for sure that I am, as I said, I'm part of the project from the beginning up to the end. And yeah, I think that's it. From my personal side, I would like to introduce you my company, RUAG International. Just very briefly, it's owned by the Swiss government. This is mainly because it's has still a very or a certain part is related to military items. So, of course, from a government point of view, it's important to have RUAG under its control. The net sales in 2019 was about 2 billion Swiss francs. And now at the moment there is a reorganization taking place, but I won't go into that as this is not of importance at the moment. On the right-hand side of the screen, you can see that RUAG or RUAG International is separated into different business units, whereas space is about a quarter, let's say, of the whole turnover comes from space, 339 million Swiss francs. And the company is, of course, very international. We are in 14 different countries, whereas space has sites in total of 6 different locations. You can see as well that the main turnover is gained in Europe, roughly 1 billion Swiss francs. Now let's move on. In total, we have about 4,500 employees, whereas RUAG Space alone has roughly 1,300 at the moment. And as I said, one of the really cool parts of my job is that I have to do with colleagues from all over the world, mainly from Europe, of course, France, Germany, Spain, Italy, but also then from the US or even Japan. So this is one of my favorite parts of my job, that it's so international. Then another point which actually surprised me is that the average duration of employment in RUAG is 8 years, which is, especially for nowadays, it's quite impressive that people stay for such a long period. But this shows as well that just space itself is so interesting for people that they love to stay for a while and not just move on after a couple of years. And what surprised me as well is that about 10% of our employees in RUAG have been working for RUAG then more than 20 years, which is also quite impressive, I think. And another point which I see also is that more and more women get into project leading positions. At the moment, we have 20% women, and I think this number is increasingly all the time. And of course, most of the employees have a very high education, so they have masters or even a PhD in a certain area. So this then is the results then that the average age with 44 is not super low, but yeah, this is rather result that the educational standards are so high that yeah, the average age is not 30 or even below 30. Now let's have a glance at the different side. RUAG Space is located. We have 3 different sites in the US, in Denver, Huntsville, and in Florida, in Titusville. This is, of course, of a very high importance because a big part of the space potential, let's say, lies in the US. And then in Europe, we are represented, of course, in Zurich, in Emmen, and in Nyon. In Austria, we have 2 sites, in Germany as well, and then we are in Finland and Sweden. Now, let's move on. And I want to show you a short clip, which actually I instead of like just trying to explain you all the different products RUAG is offering, I thought it's probably easier and more interesting when I just show you a very brief clip of the different products RUAG is producing. So let's enjoy it. Bit of commercial advertisement. Exactly. So yeah, instead of explaining that, I just want to show you we have separated or segmented the products into 3 product groups. So this is the electronics, spacecraft products, and the launchers. I won't go into too much detail because my expertise does not lie in these areas. But yeah, I mainly work for the product unit spacecraft, for satellite structures and mechanisms. So this is, let's say, the area I do my contracts or my projects in. And yeah, then as a last slide, I thought I'd show you a picture which was taken a couple of years ago. So I think about 2 years ago, I was asked if I want to have my signature sent into space. So I had to sign a piece of paper, and then they engraved my signature into the backside of a mechanism, which was pretty cool, I thought. And then, yeah, you can see it on the slide here. And then this was, I think it was a satellite. It was sent to space. So yeah, that was one of my favorite moments, that I know now that somewhere out there, my signature, at least my signature, is flying around. And yeah, that was a great moment for me, and also a sign of, let's say, appreciation. Yeah, so that was a very nice and decent moment for myself. And yeah, if you have any questions, I think we have a Q&A session at the end, but if you have any other topics you want to discuss with me, please feel free to get in contact with me. So that's it from my side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Florian. I have a small question regarding your daily work at RUAG, because we can see that RUAG is pretty impressive and you have several, let's say, activities. But you, especially you, regarding your job and your expertise, you are working mainly for private contracts, or more sharing private but also public contracts?
That's indeed true. Yeah, it's kind of a mix. It's private as well as commercial projects. But I think, well, my experience is not huge, but over the last 4 years, it kind of moves into more and more commercial projects. But there are still some public projects, of course, yeah, which I'm just taking care then of all the legal aspects and also all the commercial issues, anything which is related with money, let's say. Because my background, I had roles in different finance departments. So my background is not a pure law, not a pure law background, let's say.
Okay, thank you. This is very interesting, your point, because we have seen also with Alexander that Alexander studied different field and worked in different field before going to law. So we can see already that you have a similar thing, exploring different fields. So maybe I will stop there, and we will have more questions during the Q&A session. So
sure.
Following up, we will have a word from the Swiss delegation at ESA by Madame Kamlesh Brocard from the Swiss Space Office. Please, Kamlesh, the microphone is yours.
Hi, everyone. So good afternoon. Thank you, Julien, for sharing the presentation. And also thank you for hosting the second edition, or the second part in this 2020 series of Be a Star in ESA's Universe. I'll say a disclaimer now for the audience. We do call it Be a Star in ESA's Universe because this is, we want to make ESA better known in Switzerland as a potential employer. So for the students, typically those who are maybe in the second, third year of their higher education, and also for the young professionals, because we have felt that it's not known well enough. However, having said that, we'd also want to raise more awareness about the potential for careers that also exist in space, but not just at ESA, but also in the national space sector. So, having said that, I would like to just take you through what I will talk about for the next maybe 7 minutes. I will not go into space law because it's probably, even though that's the title of the session today, and the reason being, you'll probably find it surprising, I am a lawyer by training. I do part of my tasks and responsibilities at the Swiss Space Office is related to national legal affairs, and some of it also with international space law. However, this is not to go deeper into it. It is, however, an infinitely fascinating subject. As Alex probably touched upon earlier, it's things, the complexity of the subject is what makes it so much more fascinating. I personally was not, maybe before I go into that, so the next part of it will be about space in Switzerland and what it is about. And the next part, afterwards will be, well, what's next? And I will leave you in the very capable hands or advice of Florence Loustalot. Having said that, I will not go into space law. I will still tell you it is a fascinating subject. Don't be put off by the size of the books. Pick one up, flick through it, and read about the challenges that we have, and especially with the changes and the evolution of the space sector, going from primarily state engaging in space activities to more and more private actors. That means the different companies, we do have some in Switzerland as well, go out and explore and read about them. So that's what I would tell you to do. So next slide, please. Switzerland does engage in space activities. I still get raised eyebrows about, oh yes, what do we do in Switzerland? What does the country do? There is a political will, a commitment from the government to invest in space. That is also based on a way of doing things that is primarily Swiss and something that works for the country. It is, yes, we will engage in space activities, but given the competences that exist, the needs of the country, we opt to do it in a way that is very collaborative. We collaborate with ESA, and then we do it with the various international organizations that you see the logos out there. And the reason why Switzerland says, yes, we will invest in space and we will commit to being a reliable partner in space is also because for the utilization, for the benefits it brings to the population. This, on the one hand, and you can find out about so many services that benefit from space applications and space services on a daily basis. And the second pillar would be, we are committed to investing in space because it's an area that allows us to push the boundaries of knowledge, and that's in science, that's in technology, and that's an area where it can be seen as one of the ideal playground to be able to explore, to be able to do more, to do better, and that is one of the reasons that we engage in space. The third reason is that we engage in space activities not by investing in the whole range of possibilities that's out there, but we take into account what are the competences that exist in Switzerland and what are the things that we can do and that will also benefit not just us, but also our partners, our international partners, what it is we can provide that makes sense for everyone. That is, in a nutshell, the general gist of how Switzerland acts as a partner in space. Next slide, please. So this is really just a snapshot of what does it look like on the ground in Switzerland in terms of space activities, or rather than saying on the ground, I should say what happens in the community, in the space community, what is being achieved. And that space community, that includes higher education institutes, you have the Fachhochschule, you have the universities, the ETH, EPFL, and the companies, as well as the research institutes. You've had great examples from Florian just before of what is achieved within companies, within private industry, and all that. It's really, there is a transfer of knowledge and technology that happens, without which all these partners work together. The universities, whatever they are produced, needs then to be transferred to companies so that there is a real product behind. Next slide, please, Julien. And this is where we can be seen, and we're not just a lovely picture outside, but inside there's lots of components that are made in Switzerland, and the Ariane is probably carrying lots of very, very high-end instruments to be launched in space. So that's what happens concretely. Next slide, please. I wanted to show you also that it's not just stuff, products, services that happens far beyond, but it's also how it impacts daily use, how it's there for all our uses. And it's not just all the so the entertainment, the sports, but it's also about Earth observation, it's about navigation, it's about the use of upstream and downstream products and services in happier times, but also in times of need. And we're really happy and relieved that these services are there when we need them most. Next slide, please. I have to say this, it is part of what is also what makes it all possible. That's a significant figure for the year 2020. Law is an enabler. Money is also an enabler for these things to happen. And talking about that, just to illustrate how it works, how this collaboration with ESA is, because ESA is our space agency as well. It functions on the basis of what's called the geographical return, or what I also prefer is the juste retour principle. It literally means that the money that is invested from the member states, so here typically with Switzerland, is invested at ESA. And that money, the funding that is done, it then comes back to Switzerland in the form of research contracts, industrial contracts, on the basis of international competition with the other member states, and it flows back into the country. So that gives rise to a unique situation, which is a win-win situation for everyone. And that's how we see it. And this is also part of the reason we continue to commit at such to the agency. It is something that we see comes back to us, and it's something that we will carry on doing. Next slide, please. So, having given you all this insight in a snapshot, so why should you care? Or why should we at government level think you should care or look for a career somewhat at ESA, or, as I said earlier, in the larger space sector? You can look in Switzerland as well. We care because Switzerland has opted to not duplicate and have its own space agency until now, but to say ESA is also our space agency. 95% of our space budget is invested every year at ESA. And we want it to function, and it does function in an amazing way, and it also needs, it functions also on the basis of diversity. It's a richness that exists at ESA, and that richness also comes from the diversity in its staff, and the diversity in its staff from the diversity in its member states, which are then represented at ESA. And for Switzerland, it's a very important aspect that we carry on being represented at the agency level it doesn't mean that once we have ESA staff of Swiss nationality that they are working for Switzerland. That is not at all what I mean. What I mean is it's a diversity that comes from having on a team, on any team. Florian mentioned it, Alex mentioned it, and I'm sure a lot of you have experienced it or know of it from different experiences at university or in your institutions, that the dialogues, the conversations, and the ways of finding solutions are different the more diverse the origins of the people, or the more diverse our approaches to challenges are. And this is also something that we foster at the agency. Next slide, please. I think that would be one of my last slide, actually. Which career at ESA? Of course, as was said before me, yes, we want, career-wise, we want to foster and promote space careers for young engineers and scientists. Yes, there is absolutely no doubt about that. That is ESA's core business. We don't need 90% of lawyers, we don't need 90% of accountants. However, it is also indeed for a diverse range of expertise, which is they add to the competences which are needed at ESA. It makes it work. You can say it's the oil that makes everything work. It's taking it from one level to the other. It's making the projects come together and advancing them and making them progress, and making sure that collaborations happen in the smoothest way, but also in the best interest of ESA and its member states. Now, having said this, I will also then leave you in the very capable hands of Florence, who will then let you know what are the different ways in which you can approach ESA, and also for the Swiss citizens, what are the possibilities that exist. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kamlesh. So without further ado, I will now pass the lead to Florence Loustalot to present us some programs for ESA member state, students and young professionals. Please, Florence, the microphone is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you very much, Kamlesh, Alex, Florian, Julien. I will now try to partager my presentation too. And yes, I think you probably can see it now. Thank you. Before I start, and I would like to briefly come back also to this, let's say, profiles that we have, and the fact that we are not all engineers or scientists when we work at ESA. Myself, for example, I've studied languages, and I've started my career, let's say, being a French teacher in England, then moving to Germany in the European Southern Observatory, and FAO in Italy, and then ESA in Italy, and now ESA in Nordwijk, and having moved at a certain point towards human resources. So I also, with this, I want to say that at a certain point, your career, you have an idea at the beginning of your career, or you don't, actually, you don't really know what you want to do, but you know you have a passion for something, an interest for something, be it space or other. For me, it was the others, people. And this has been the logic of all my jobs, wherever I've been, and wherever I've worked at, it was always in relation with people. So just to say that, again, now I'm in HR. I've been in HR for many years, but in various roles. So we also have at ESA, not only engineers and scientists, but also lawyers, finance people, HR people, communication, PR, but we will come back to that. So for now, I start with my presentation. And as you can see, we have a few programs which we call entry-level and research programs. And I will start straight away with the student internships program, because it's the one which, let's say, is dedicated to students, the students who are in their, let's say, last but penultimate, let's say, year at university before their master. And students come for 3 to 6 months at ESA, and they start to discover what is ESA, what is the world of space and the various jobs that we have in space, in ESA. Now, next week, we will publish something like 100 topics of student opportunities. This year, due to the situation we all know, these student placements will be, let's say, offered remotely, meaning that if you apply, you will do your internship from home. So this is very important to know. But we have kept the program alive, okay? So following the student placement, when you finally are graduated, you can become a young graduate trainee at ESA. So each year, we offer something like 120 young graduate opportunities for students who have just graduated at master's level or are about to graduate. You don't need to have experience. In fact, we prefer, let's say, if you don't have experience, you may have a few internships, but not a real professional experience, 2-3 years in industry. No, not for a young graduate. Like Alex, when he started, he was a young graduate, just fresh from university. So you start, you have this 1-year contract or 2 if you are extended, let's say, and you work with an expert, you work with people who really have experience in ESA. You work in a multicultural environment with a team of people of various backgrounds. And the idea is that you build up this knowledge and that you then go maybe to industry or wherever to continue your career, and maybe one day you come back to ESA with these 2, let's say, side of your, let's say, experience, be it in ESA and in industry. Or, like Alex, you may continue your career in ESA. So there are many opportunities, let's say, that can follow your experience as young graduate. Okay. To be a young graduate, of course, or a student or a research fellow, we'll see later, you must be a citizen of a member state of ESA or of European cooperating states or of Latvia and Slovenia. So this is very important. I want to also mention another program, which is the National Trainee Program. The National Trainee Program is the same profile as young graduate trainees. The national trainees are just graduated and they come to ESA for 1 year or 2, but in fact, they are, let's say, recruited by the national agencies which have an agreement with ESA. So Switzerland, for example, has an agreement with ESA, and we have some Swiss national trainees at ESA. Each year we make a recruitment. So the national trainees are part of the same, let's say, the same group of the young graduate trainees. In fact, they are really assimilated together. Then as other program, which this one is dedicated to research to fellows, let's say, they are people who have just obtained their PhD or are about to obtain their PhDs. And research fellowships are for 2 to 3 years, and again are in the field of research science, space applications and technology, and they are mostly, let's say, based in our establishment in ESTEC. While, sorry, I forgot to say, it's very important, the young graduate trainees are in all our establishments, be it in ESOC in Darmstadt or in ESRIN in Italy, in ESTEC in Holland. So these 120 positions I was talking about before are all over ESA in Europe. And also something I forgot to say, very important, is that we will publish, I'm sure Julien would have asked me later, they will be published in February 21 for a recruitment in September, October 21. That's the big change. We are not publishing them this end of year, but in February 21. So you can write that in your agenda. So to continue our last, let's say, program, which is the latest born, let's say, it's the ESA co-funded research, and it's dedicated for those who are preparing a PhD or have a PhD. And there it's again a little bit different because it's a cooperation between ESA and university. So the ones who do this co-funded research are still, let's say, students of the university. The project is funded by ESA and the university, but it's really a cooperation, okay? And if I'm not wrong, it's over 2 or 3 years, depending on the project. But I really recommend for all these programs that you go to our website and that you look at the opportunities which are out, not to miss them, and look well what we propose and what we offer. What kind of disciplines? In terms of technical competencies, what do we want at ESA? And we will come back, of course. We said before that we need lawyers, we need HR, we need finance, but indeed, our core business being in engineering and science, so you can see we look for engineering profiles, system, electrical, mechanical, software, etc., etc. I will not go into details. Also, we want scientists. We look for scientists, be it in astronomy, astrophysics, geophysics, meteorology, life and material sciences. So all kind of scientific and engineering profile are of interest to ESA, but also, and let's say last but not least, all our let's say profiles of business and administrative people like law, finance, communications, PRs, HR, and I didn't mention before IT. IT is going to be also a key, let's say, competence needed in the future years, IT and cyber security. So just keep that in mind, or you can say that to your friends if they are not listening to us tonight. Now, to continue a bit on the profile, what do we want? What kind of also people? Sometimes I'm asked, what do you look for at ESA? And I say, yeah, what we want young people who are dynamic, enthusiastic, who have a passion, who are curious. Curiosity is a big asset because there is no border. You always want to discover further. So passion for space. In fact, I said also we are looking for people with a master or PhD. And also we want young people who are interested in working in team in a multicultural environment. And also, Kamlesh was mentioning before diversity. Diversity is very important. We have diversity at ESA, geographic diversity, but also generation diversity and gender diversity, of course, also. We are, of course, we strongly believe that we are successful through diversity. If we all learn from each other, from all these member states that we have, the citizens from 22, 24 member states working all together, it's a richness and it's interesting. As I say, it's enriching for everybody of us as individual and collectively. So I think that with this, I have finished my presentation. And I'm sure that we will have quite a few questions.
Thank you very much, Florence. So yeah, thank you very much also for the transition. So now we're gonna enter in the Q&A session. So how we gonna manage that? We're gonna start with to ask the question about space law in the world, space law in general. And then in the second point, to let the chat and the viewers ask their question about hiring and position at ESA. We're going to do a second, let's say, topic during this Q&A session about hiring, YGTs, and the different programs ESA proposed. So first of all, we're gonna move on into space law into the world and the dedicated question. So maybe a question for Alexander, but before asking my question, maybe a small sound check. Alexander, can you hear me?
I can hear you very well, Julien. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Sigh of relief. Yes, good.
Yes, good. So
Much easier like that.
The first question is for you. And the question is the following. In which area is there the greatest need to establish international rules? Satellites, moon mining, military, debris removal, other?
That's an interesting one. Allow me that I start half a century in the past to answer that question. Those of you interested in space law will know that we do have a basic set of international rules. We do have a set of international treaties on principles governing the activities of states in the exploration and use of outer space. That's the title of the most prominent and famous of these treaties, the Outer Space Treaty of 1967. Now, those treaties are still valid today, they are in force, and they sort of lay the foundation, the basis of what space law, international space law is today. They are complemented by national space laws. So each country may elect to establish a national space law in order to define more from country to country specific conditions on how to authorize and supervise space activities. But the international space treaties of the 1960s have never been complemented or rarely been complemented by international law later on. And that is precisely why this question is being posed now. Are there important needs in order to define international law? I would pick two developments of the past years. One certainly is that space traffic is increasing year by year, mostly through the advent of private operators who have, I wouldn't say discovered space, but in the last years we saw a democratization. It's easier to go into outer space. It's possible also if you're not a big national agency, if you're a private actor, if you're a company, rich or just a startup, or rich startup, whatever, you have the opportunity to travel into outer space. We see projects like mega constellations where many thousands of satellites are being put or planned to be put in outer space. So this step increase of space traffic has led to the question, how do we organize space in a more sustainable way? Space flight, so that future generations still can profit from the freedom of exploration and use granted by the Outer Space Treaty in 1967. So that is certainly a topic where we really need to further develop rules and to look how we can make spaceflight more sustainable. And that leads me to the second topic that is actually called space traffic management. You will hear that very often in the contemporary debate. Do we need to have rules about space traffic, a bit like we organize maritime traffic, or car traffic, if you wish, or air traffic? Outer space is not anymore a question of very few people sending very few satellites every now and then into outer space in a geopolitical context of a Cold War. Outer space has become a daily business for all of us. Our infrastructures, our lives on Earth greatly profit from space. And that increase in traffic goes along with the need to organize the traffic. So I would say those are two areas, in order to answer to the question, that definitely will be addressed in the years to come by space lawyers all around the world.
Thank you very much, Alexander. I have now a question for Kamlesh, very interesting one. As a neutral country, does Switzerland hold a specific position regarding space law?
Yeah. With regards to space law, so Switzerland has ratified 4 of the 5 international space law treaties. The only one that's not been ratified is the Moon Agreement, and the other 4 are the OST, the Liability Convention, I'm forgetting them now, but it's the 4 of them, apart from the Moon Agreement. And so we do abide by the international law obligations that we have. We do mainly our space activities via ESA, which has also ratified as an international organization a couple of the conventions and also informed of its abiding by the rules contained in the international law. So I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank you very much. Now I will move on with a question more for industrial point of view. So for Florian, and I really quote the question from the audience. Does the economic war between USA and Europe have an impact in the business of RUAG space? Do you see any issues for you?
Thank you for the question. The war between the economic war between the US and Europe, right?
Yes.
No, not at all. To be honest, from my point of view, there is no impact. Thank God. That there would be, let's say, some distress between Europe and Swiss companies on an industrial side. So from my point of view, as I mentioned also in my presentation, I can just talk for RUAG, but one of RUAG's strategic goals is, of course, also to enter the space market in the US, because that's one of the main areas where you can gain a lot of profit. So I don't see any, or too much, or not an impact at all, actually, on all of these. You called it an economic war. I don't see any impact.
Okay, and now coming back to, let's say, to collaboration, I have a question for Alexander about Artemis. So what is ESA's position on the Artemis Accords, in particular, given that some member states have signed them already?
Thank you. So do you hear me again? First question, good.
Yes.
Answer. I don't want to disappoint the person having asked the questions, but I cannot give you today a position of ESA, of the European Space Agency, on the Artemis Accords, because that would actually be a position to be defined by our member states. See, this is the beauty of working in an international intergovernmental organization. I am just a person in the executive. That means I'm a staff working for ESA. Of course, as a lawyer privately, I read, I have my opinions. But if the organization itself expresses a political position, that would be up to our member states to discuss that position and then eventually to express that position. So I can't give you the position of ESA on the Artemis Accords. But as it's already pointed out in the question itself, some ESA member states have signed Artemis Accords 2 weeks ago, I believe. And that is a position in itself of those governments towards these accords. And I think that's the beginning of a nucleus of an answer, possibly from a European side. Maybe others follow, maybe not. I don't have an insight into what other European governments decide to do, at least not an official insight. And so we will see how this story develops. But more than that, at this stage, I cannot say.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we're going to move on more on the study field and how to be hired as YGT, or depending the program regarding your different studies. So first of all, I have also another question for Alexander, and maybe Florence, you can help him if he needs. is there a master in space law, or let's say it's a general study and studying law, and then you go to space, basically?
Yeah. So yes, that's easily answered. Yes, there are several masters in space law, but usually postgraduate studies. So you don't study space law. That would be also quite a narrow field, narrowing down your possibilities in the future. So you study law. You might focus then on public international law or on European law or on commercial law, whatever. And if you then elect to specialize in space law, you have several opportunities. There are LLM programs, there are summer courses. Maybe I don't even want to start to mention one, because then the question is, why didn't you mention the other one? But I would just give you a very practical example. Go online and type in LLM in space law, and you will discover that there are various opportunities in Europe, that there are various opportunities outside Europe, of course, from the Americas to Asia to Australia. So yes, this is a topic really on the rise. And on top, maybe one thing, since I'm working for ESA, I shall mention that. However, if you're really interested from an academic point of view in space law, there is a beautiful institution called the European Center for Space Law, ECSL, that is, let's say, hosted and managed by ESA, where we try really to give a roof for all those people, from professors to students, to practitioners interested in space law. And if you go to the website of ECSL, you'll find also a lot about education opportunities in space law.
Thank you very much for your answer. Now I will have a fair amount of questions to Florence, as you can imagine. The first one is, do you have any advices for young people who wish to apply for a position at ESA?
That's a very interesting and very broad question. So yes, I must say, quite a few advice, and maybe I can take the opportunity. First of all, in terms of studies, I would always say the same. Just try to study what you are really interested in and what you like. I'm sure that everybody here will just agree to what I'm saying, because if you have pleasure, you do better. That's, I think, something we all know, okay? Now, if you want to apply for a traineeship, young graduate or student at ESA, or even for a job, permanent job, I would say, first, try to go on our website regularly, set up an alert, which will tell you when the jobs are being published, so that you don't miss an opportunity. Okay, so that's the first thing. Second, and then you tell me, Julien, if I'm going in the wrong direction, okay? But what I say, second, select, for example, for the YGTs or for the students in particular, look at all the opportunities proposed, read them, and select the one which is most, let's say, in line with your profile, and again, I will say your interest. Okay? Third, if you are selected to come for an interview, prepare. Just don't go, no, before there is the other step, which is very important, your motivation letter and your CV. Remember, it's the first contact you will have with us or with any recruiter in any case. You know, it can be whatever is the employer, your motivation letter and your CV. So be focused, concise, clear, tell us enough, but not too much. It's very difficult, the balance. But in the end, you have to be clear and show your interest and motivation. Then you are selected to come for an interview. Prepare. This is also key, and this will make the difference, most probably, with other, let's say, candidates. If you prepare on who you are, what you have done, but also, what is ESA? What is RUAG? Okay, what is the Swiss Space Office? If you come as a candidate to an interview and you have no clue what this organization is, you have a problem. So please prepare. And I think, and yeah, voila, that was let's say the few advice I would like to give, which I think are important.
Thank you very much. This is very important, and I do agree with you. Now, as you mentioned during your presentation, we know that next week you will open opportunities for stagiaires, for interns.
Yeah.
And in the coming months, in February 2021, if I'm not mistaken, you will open a position for YGTs.
Yeah.
I would like to know if already you know if some opportunities will be open into the legal domain, into the law domains.
I mean, in the past years, and I can say probably into the last 10 years, we have had something, not a lot, but 2-3 positions of YGTs open each year, I would say, in law in general. Alex, you know also yourself, because I think you are tutoring also some YGTs. You have been YGTs and you are tutoring YGTs. We have also positions at ECSL. Every 2 years, I think, we open a position. Alex was mentioning that. And we have also positions as contract officers. But also, going further, we were mentioning before other areas, let's say, we have had some positions in communication. Every year, 1, 2, 3, 2 is a good thing, or in facility management, or in HR.
Okay, thank you very much. And regarding the program for PhDs, do you open some, or if the case, do you open so the former NPI program, now it's the ESA co-funded research, right?
Yeah.
Do you open positions regarding this program?
No, there I must say it's not managed by HR, this program. It's managed by a colleague who is heading, by the way, the advanced concept team. So he is someone who is looking for innovative ideas. So I would really advise on this one to go to the website, even on our career website. It's very clear. It's called co-funded research. You click and you follow the instruction. You can call Leopold. I'm sure he will not mind. But no, for this program, it's not, because the person and the people who come and do this co-funded research, they do it from university. They have access to our labs in ESTEC, but they are not on site, and they don't get a contract with ESA. They are still students of their, or PhD, or students of their universities.
Okay, thank you very much. This is understood. Once again, we have some question, but this is a very specific question, and it's case by case questions from the different viewer. And I'm very sorry, I cannot go into details of those questions. So maybe Florence, can you let us know? You have also an email where
Yes.
some viewers can send you a specific question on different topics, right?
Yes, I mean, if viewers want to send a mail to an address I'm going to give you now, and then my colleagues who check this address very, very regularly will forward them to me or to whoever is responsible or in charge of that topic. The address is contact.human.resources@esa.int. It's a bit complicated, maybe, yeah?
It's okay. Thank you very much, and we will post it in the description of the
Yes,
video,
thank you.
like that.
Thank you.
All the viewers will have already the right email.
Yeah, thank you, Julien.
So thank you very much, all of you. With this question and answer, I will close the Q&A session. So now I will conclude this session. So first of all, I will thank all the speakers, Alexander, Florian, Florence, Kamlesh. I will also thank you, all the viewers, and I hope this session was very interesting for you. To the viewers, please check out also in the video description, you will find a survey to answer in order to consolidate the future events, because we will try to do more events like that. So with this survey, you will help us also to consolidate a bit our event. So once again, thank you very much and have a nice evening.